hard to believe that 2022 is coming to an end. It's been a heck of a year in the Aquarium & Maine fish basement. We've built new tanks, we've done some major rescapes, we've raised up some fish, we've had lots of fish breed, we changed filters over to vegetable filters, we made the ecosystem tanks even more ecosystem, all kinds of things going on. 2023, we have the fish basement annex being built right now. And you know I'm gonna fill that thing full of crazy DIY tanks. So, and when I say crazy, I really mean it. These tanks are gonna be insane. What I've got planned is nuts. So, but before that, you know what? Before we get ahead of ourselves into 2023, let's go back in time. I have some lost footage that I found from 2018, end of 2017, when I was finishing the fish basement and building the 3,000 gallon. So we're gonna see the tail end of that. We're gonna see the cichlids when they were, those humongous cichlids at 3,000 gallon. We're gonna see them when they were little babies just going in that 3,000 gallon. We're gonna see the original scape in there. And you know, this was an old house that I bought, and before I finished the Aquarium & Maine fish basement, I had to finish the upstairs, had to rebuild it. Well, you had to have some place to live for the family, so guess what? All my tanks, they weren't down here. They were in a little room upstairs in my office. So, you know, I didn't have a lot of space at the time, but doesn't mean I didn't keep aquariums. And we're gonna check out those aquariums. We're gonna see what, you know, what can I do with just a room, you know, and what do those tanks look like? And we're gonna see some fish that you're gonna recognize because they ended out their years in these big tanks down in the fish basement. Specifically, one that was beloved to me, his final years in the 3,000 gallon. So he started in a 40 gallon and he ended his life at a 3,000 gallon. So what's even better than me telling you about it is, let's get in and check it out. Let's go. All right, the upstairs is largely complete. Everybody's happily living upstairs, so it's finally time to finish the basement and start a 3,000 gallon. So you can see I've finished the basement and I'm halfway into building a 3,000 gallon. You got to remember, I've been waiting 5 years to build this tank. You know, just seeing the basement empty, this empty blank slate down there, just wanting to build this, but having to, you know, to do the things I had to do first to get to this point. So I'm finally here. It's close, you know, it looks like something. Obviously, there's still a ton of work to go, but in my mind, I'm already adding fish to this tank by this point. So it's getting pretty real for me. But back upstairs in my office, so here's where we have the tanks I had running at the time while I was doing all the rehab on the house. So this is a 60 gallon, 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot cube aquarium. And yes, it is corals. I have done corals in the past. I do love these guys. I do love corals, especially the softies. That's sort of my thing. I like the movement and everything. And I do appreciate the smaller scapes where you can appreciate smaller things like say small polyp corals or crustaceans like the blood red fire shrimp or scooter blennies, little things like that. But you do have to keep in mind that the whole time that I'm running this tank, I'm secretly dreaming about Predator Bay because my heart really lies with the fish. I totally appreciate corals and live plants and macroalgae, and they completely accentuate tanks, but at the core of my heart, I'm a big fish guy. I like sharks and rays and peacock bass and discus and all those kinds of fish. I do like the smaller fish too, but I like them mixed in with the bigger guys. So to hold me over, all I could really run saltwater wise was this 60 gallon. And the crazy thing about this tank is it only had a few fish in it, a couple clowns, the yellow-eye coal tang, which I still have to this day. That yellow-eye coal tang, he's in the 265 part of the 1500 system right now, as well as a lot of these. All these things got moved over to the 265 when they originally came down in the basement. But yeah, all these fish got moved over. Same with the clowns. They're there. I don't know how old they are. Definitely like 10 years or something. They've been around. But I was to say with this tank is that it doesn't even have a filter. It just has in the back of it. It has a compartment with some basically just more base rock or live rock, and all it does is the water flows through that, goes through a filter pad and comes back to the tank, and then there's internal water flow with the power head you see there. So very, very simple tank, but and not a lot of fish stock, but you can see that you can have a really fun interactive tank with a lot going on even without really, you know, a traditional filter. Okay, so anyone who's followed my channel for a little while, they're going to recognize these fish, and they're going to recognize a fish that I became very attached to, Jack, I know the original name, the electric blue Jack Dempsey. Well, this is where he started. He came in as a baby, and he had 2 buddies with him. There was 3 total, and they were doing awesome, and basically they're eating well, they're very active, everything is great, and then after 1 month, one of them dies. And I can't find any outward signs of problems, disease, anything like that. I test everything, everything's fine. I'm feeding them all kinds of, variations of food. So I'm thinking, okay, it's just a fluke. Another month goes by, second one dies, exact same situation. So I'm left with the single electric blue Jack Dempsey and this 40-gallon breeder. And I'm just terrified that this could happen again. Well, as we know, Jack ended up living like 8 or 9 years. So the third one, not only does he grow up in here, he then proceeds to go live with other fish in a 75-gallon and then a 150, and then finally he lived his last few years in the 3,000-gallon with all the beasts in there, and always held his own and was always first to eat, and nobody ever messed with him. So crazy beginnings, but fortunately at least one of the trio survived, and I was able to have electric blue Jack Dempsey for all that time, and I really want to get another one of these guys. So here's one you've never seen on my channel, and that's, I do like koi as well, and this is a sunroom on the upstairs of my house, and I have built a koi pond in there. This is the very beginning of it. It looks quite a bit different now. I've never covered it in a video, but I think I probably will at some point. But yeah, it's just a DIY koi pond that I built in there. So this is like a sunken room, so it actually goes down 30 inches, and then it's kind of flush to give you that walkway so you can walk out there. It's a great place to have coffee in the morning, in the spring and summer and all that. And of course, me, DIY filtration, and it's not even done yet. I haven't even put it in the media, just sort of showing you the build. Basically, that's the settling chamber, and then there is now ceramic media and oxygen infused into it. And then the other one is basically a polishing pad, and then it goes through a bunch of matalamat and drains, back out into the pond. So very inexpensive, super effective. This is actually, pond's been running now for, gosh, probably 3 years. I built it at the same time that I was building a 3,000-gallon, but just want to throw it in there. And I think this spring we'll have to do a video on it and show these guys. Now the funny thing is, you're going to see the fish I put in there. These guys right here. I can see my cat in there inspecting them in the bag. But so all these guys are still there, and it's pretty funny to see if you'll appreciate when you see them in the upcoming video, because they're ginormous now. So these little guys, they just grew into some absolute beasts of fish. All right, I know this is the part that some of you guys have been waiting for, the lost footage on the 3,000-gallon. So this is right after the tank was set up. I had a 75-gallon with some Severums and other guys like that, and then I also had the fish growing out in the tub for the 3,000-gallon. As you can see there, the lenticulata pike. It's so crazy to see him as a little baby like that, because he's just so massive now. All of these guys, all the ones that are still around, and there's Jack. You can see he made it in there. He was one of the first fish in. But it's just nuts seeing this tank after having it run now for 4 years, seeing it on day one, with all that wonderful cyanobacteria on the sand bed. But you'll see it later in this video. Actually, that all goes away. You get the wild Oscar and the Severum. Now this changed a lot, because this initial stock, it went well for a while, but with all these Oscars, I had a couple of the lemon Oscars, and the genetics on them was just not up to par. They never grew. There's early videos of the 3,000-gallon where you see the lemons, and they feed every time they aggressively eat. They just never ever grew. It was crazy, and I couldn't even believe the other guys, all the other fish outgrew them, that they never really bothered them. But they eventually died. I mean, they just, again, the source thing with the electric blue Jack Dempsey, where they never stopped eating or anything like that. They just sort of, one day they were dead, no visible signs. So that was those 2 lemons you see right there. And of course we saw the true parrots. We know they've multiplied massively in here. And there's also the red Oscars. I love these guys, but for some reason, after like 6 months, the wild Oscar just killed them both overnight. I mean, I'm pretty positive it's him. That was the only one I ever saw show any aggression to anybody in the early stages of the tank. And in the morning, the two of them were just dead. They just and they had visible signs of being attacked. So I don't know what happened, but the wild Oscar just wasn't having it. And this is just another sort of a holding tank. You guys will know this as the 150 Reef Cube or the Riverbend tank, or the tank that just split its seam and dumped 150 gallons of water on my floor. But it started off as sort of a holding tank for these guys as I was bringing them down. These were future additions to the very first Amazonian Islands aquarium, when that was the 220. But right now the 150 was just a holding tank for these guys, and it's an enjoyable tank as a holding tank, but really I just wanted to show that it, all the cycles it's gone through. And then of course all the contents of the 60-gallon cube, they made their way downstairs. The 60-gallon cube was retired, and they were added into the 265-gallon aquarium. This is the 7-foot aquarium that's tied into the 1,500-gallon system. So this is the 7-foot 265-gallon aquarium that's sitting on top of the 700-gallon refugium sump. And then it's, at this time it didn't exist, but it's been connected. It's now connected to the reef slope aquarium, the 600-gallon reef slope. So all of them together is around 1,500 gallons. But at the time, it was just the contents of the reef cube moved into here, and just with the big refugium sump underneath. So I didn't, again, with this 265, I always suffered with not knowing exactly what I want to do with it. Like, I loved the corals in the smaller tank where it was easier to tend to them, but in this in-wall aquarium where I have to take the panel off to go in there, and also dosing huge amounts of water volume like this, it just started to go downhill for me because it came harder and harder, and I just didn't have the love for these guys to want to put the extra work, which is why I originally tried to do the 150 Reef Cube to get into a smaller environment where I could tend to it better, because it just doesn't work for me in a large-scale aquarium like that. And then, of course, this is the very first Amazonian Islands when it was in the 220-gallon. So it was a similar concept. You can see the origins of the 750-gallon Amazonian Islands, where the thought process came from. But here it was in the 220. And, there's a reason I build all the tanks so deep nowadays, because the width is great, 6 feet, 8 feet. These are nice, long aquariums. They have a lot of potential, but the front to back, it just never worked. I was always very limited on escapes. It was, there's just so limited what I could do. There's the redhead geophagus, which those guys, we know they're in the 750 Amazonian Islands now, and we know how huge they are. In fact, all these fish, everybody here got moved over. So all these fish just don't went from upgrades. These guys grew up in a 40-gallon breeder, then a 75, then the 150, and then into the 220, and then the 750. So here is Amazonian Islands in the 220 when it was really at its peak, with all the cichlids getting some size to them, and me filling in the ditherfish. And you see the red blue Colombian tetra there. They're starting to get really old. So at this point, this is 3 years ago, and those red blue Colombian tetras, they were moved down from another tank where they'd been there for 3 years, and now they've been in the 750 Amazonian Islands for a year. So they're getting really up there, and I can see them sort of starting to fade, but they had quite the life. And then of course there's the electric blue Akara, who's got his third spawn of babies in the 750 right now. So again, been around for a long time. And all those tetra, there's one left of the black tetra that was in here that he's been around forever, probably more than 6 years now. And like I said, of course, the redhead geophagus, we know those guys they're pretty maxed out now, and people are pointing out that they look like they're getting ready to start breeding, and I think they're right. I think that's probably just around the corner. And at this point, I think they're the only cichlid that haven't bred for me in these tanks. So, actually the Severum haven't bred for me either. Now we pivot back to the 3,000 gallon, because who doesn't want to see a little more of this? I think the key thing here is you can see it settling in. All that cyano is now gone off the substrate. I've increased the water flow. You see the power heads in the back. There's a lot more water flow. I put in like 2 sprigs of dwarf sage, and they're starting to just grow out everywhere. as well as somehow the swords. I don't even remember planting the swords, but they're starting to grow out of the substrate as well. 2 different types of sword plants. This is back when I had the lily pads and everything. But it's been a whole evolution with the 3,000 gallon, because a lot of things that work at the beginning of the build, like when the fish were smaller, like the lily pads. So as the lily pads got bigger and bigger and started taking over the top of the aquarium, and the fish got bigger and bigger, and they started hitting that food really hard, they just were thrashing the lily pads, just destroying the leaves, and there was fragments everywhere. And the same sort of thing happened when I had the wisteria in here, is that it did awesome. It grew really well, and it was kind of like the grass plants, where the fish can swim through it, and that didn't cause them to want to uproot it or anything like that. But the problem is it kept throwing off babies constantly. So it was just a never-ending farming thing for me to constantly be, culling the top of the aquarium, to get all these leaf fragments and everything out. Oh, you can see how the lenticulata pike is grown in size. And there's Jack, of course, down there. And the peacock bass, one of the peacock bass is in here, and then the wild Oscar just getting huge, and the Zebrina is finally here. That is a fish I love. The temperament on the Zebrina and the coloration is perfect. That is like a perfect pike in my opinion, especially for like a community thing. But yeah, you can see the peacock bass as a baby, still pretty big of this, but still way smaller than it is now. And this is before I put the wisteria in, so this is phase 1. Phase 1 was Anubias, Java fern, and lily pads. And then somehow, then sort of phase 1.5 was I put in the dorsage, which eventually took over the bottom of the tank. And then somehow those swords just planted themselves in there, and they got humongous. We know that some of those swords grew 3 feet all the way to the top of the surface, and we're throwing off babies left and right. That's more recent. But then in between then, I put the wisteria, and then of course, I already said why I took the wisteria out, and now this tank is undergoing a massive transformation. I've been working on it. I know there's people who are like, hey, what's going on with that, rescape of 3,000 gallon, but it's just a massive undertaking. So I want to get these other things I've been working on, like the step-by-step DIY build, get that finished, and I got all the other tanks kind of buttoned up so that I can just focus on the 3,000 gallon and get the new scape in there, because it's literally below the water is completely changed, the structure is completely changed, the type of plants and how they grow in the tank is going to be completely changed. There's going to be plants outside the water coming into it, completely changed. A whole riverbank thing, which is completely different. It's going to just totally change the look of the tank. And then even above the tank, outside of it, there's going to be essentially like a bio canopy that's going to keep the moisture and everything there, but extend the tank all the way up to the ceiling. The lights are going to be rerouted. The lights are going to be different. It's just, it already, like, I can see it right now, and it has a crazy new look to it, but it's not done yet. It's one of those things where I put so much work into it, I don't want to put it on video until it's ready, just because it hardly seems worth it to show the in-between stages. I just want to show what it looked like. I have footage of when it was essentially at its worst, where all the fish had gotten huge and they just thrashed all my plants, and I had to rescue those swords out. I consider that to be kind of the low point for the aquascape, so that it just wasn't holding up to the adult massive size of the fish. And so that's the low point, and that's where that video is going to start, and then it's going to cover the stages of revamping it, and then it's going to show obviously the end result. So I can't wait to put that one out there. It's because I put so much physical work into it, and I haven't even done video editing on it yet. There's a lot of footage just sitting there waiting. I don't even want to really think about the editing part yet, but it's going to be a massive one. It seems like every video in the 3,000 gallon ends up being like one of those like 45 minute long videos. It's just nuts. We'll see how it shakes out, but it'll definitely be longer than a normal video. There's just no way around it, because just covering that thing is just so massive. It pretty much always ends up being that way. But it is definitely cool to see this, unseen footage of this. Is probably like 6 months in now. We saw the way they were first put in, and we see about 6 months later, but you can see the tanks really settling in, which is very cool. And of course, that wasn't the only origin. So we saw the origins of the 3,000 gallon and the 265 reef and the 220 Amazonian islands. Well, this was the beginnings of the Asian jungle aquarium. Now, at this point, the Asian Jungle Aquarium was the 125-gallon aquarium. And this is just the very beginnings of me using like bags of lava rock to build up substrate, and building in the hardscape, and then putting in those first plants. These are, they haven't had a chance to grow yet. They're just added. There's just a couple fish seeding this thing, and so it's certainly not a jungle yet, but we knew that in the 125 how crazy this thing got, which pretty much was the reason that prompted me to want to build the 600-gallon Asian jungle to give this thing room to thrive. And then boom, there's that same tank, I don't know, probably 8 months later. It wasn't, maybe 6 months. It didn't take very long. It just it went crazy. So that's what made me want to go the 600. And then lastly, I finally built the reef slope aquarium, which at this point wasn't a reef slope aquarium. It was a holding aquarium for some future fish for Predator Bay. Obviously the Halleri yellow stingray and the horn shark. So just seeing these, this is a 600-gallon aquarium, 4 feet tall, 4 feet front to back, 6 feet long, and just seeing them in there made me think, you know what? I need to build this. I need to build Predator Bay. So, I just, the scale wasn't right. I knew they wouldn't, be comfortable in there long term. Even as young fish, I just wanted to see them in something bigger. So I went bigger, and that's Predator Bay there with my assistant sleeping on the job. But yeah, this is the very beginnings. I don't know if everyone saw it, because like the beginnings of Predator Bay actually happened in a video about the reef slope, or about the 600-gallon, not really about Predator Bay, but yeah, this is again where I always talk about custom. You see how I'm building between a couple pillars holding up the top floor of the house. So would like to have made it even bigger, but had to work with what I had. So yeah, that's the foundation for Predator Bay going in. And you also see that the other tank, you can see the reef cube's gone to a reef, and you can see here that the 3,000-gallon is really getting dialed in. That was when it was in really good shape for its first scape. It was looking really nice. As well as the original Amazon island. So it was a good point for the fish basement. There was a lot of stuff going on, but a lot of the tanks were maturing. It was always starting to come together, so it was definitely exciting times. And then just in the back, I'd added another drain, and then I got the grow out tub going, new monsters in there, things getting painted. All in all, the fish basement's coming together, and you know what? It's ready for an annex and a whole bunch more builds in 2023. Well, that definitely brings back some memories, checking out the lost footage from before there was a fish basement and the early days of the 3,000-gallon. Pretty wild stuff. But more importantly, we know that the aquarium basement has come a long way since then, and even more importantly, it's got a long ways to go, because in 2023 we have a ton of stuff going on. We have the fish basement annex, all new mega builds going on. In January, we have the 3,000-gallon rescape, which is a monster undertaking. We're finally going to be able to have videos of 3,000 again. We have big things going on with Predator Bay and the rest of the salt system, or at least half of the other part of the salt system. So it's going to start off with a bang in 2023, and I'm pretty sure with that annex, it's going to be a pretty wild year all the way through, because there's a lot of work to do and a lot of cool tanks to build. So thanks for watching as always. Have a happy new year, and I'll see you guys soon.